John Key is with us in the studio. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Guy.
Can you work with Donald Trump?
Oh, absolutely. Look, my job as Prime Minister of New Zealand is to have the best working relationship with other leaders that we can. The United States is a very long-standing friend and ally of New Zealand, and that doesn't change. I mean, what you have seen, and to a certain degree, Winston Peters is right about this point. In the US, historically, a very low voter turnout, about half people voted. So 92 when Clinton won the presidency, only effectively 18% of eligible Americans voted for him, because over half the people didn't vote, and he won 40% of the vote that was cast. So what you've seen with Trump, from what I can see, is you've seen a big base of people who've never voted have turned out. So they are very much non-college educated, blue-collar workers or rural workers. That's what's been the swing. New voters coming to the table. So look, in the end, that is what it is. It's a reflection in America that a lot of people think their system hasn't been working and they see him as an outsider, but that doesn't stop us having a good relationship with the US.
Can you work with someone who has been so derogatory to women, for example, saying that they should be punished for abortion, calling women pigs and dogs, rating them on their looks, saying publicly that he forces himself on women? Not to mention a host of other comments. I mean, personally, what sort of guy are we dealing with?
Yeah, so I don't get a choice, firstly, of who the next president is. Secondly, I don't have to agree with everything he either has says or might say in the future.
Can we take it the other way? Do you agree with anything he has said? Can you think of one?
Oh, look, I'm sure there'll be something in amongst it. There must be some.
There must be something.
There must be something out there. But the point is really, in the end, yep, okay. I think everybody knows that he said a whole lot of things that either you wouldn't agree with or can't ascribe to. But that's not the point now, is it? He's going to be locked into the White House. He's going to have a big administration around him. He's going to have, his own Secretary of the Treasury, his own Secretary of Defence. But more importantly, we have a very long decades and decades and decades of history with the United States.
We do, but history, as we saw last night, can be unwound pretty quickly, can't it? He's now got the House, he's got the Senate. He'll have the Supreme Court too, won't he? He will.
He'll have his capacity to appoint replacements. I mean, I think that all of that is true, and there's no question that will have an influence on the United States. He will put a more, right-wing conservative person on the bench in the Supreme Court. That is what's going to happen. But ultimately, the question you got to ask yourself is, in the world of challenges and issues that Donald Trump and America face, is New Zealand one of them? And the answer is absolutely not. So we've had a great growing and strong economy, one of the strongest economies in the developed world, without TPP. It would have been nice to have, but we're not going to have it in the short term. But it hasn't stopped us doing well.
It's dead, isn't it, under this?
What'll happen is, I think...
It's in a coma.
Yeah, it's definitely not going anywhere in a hurry. That's another way of putting it. But the point I would say is, does that mean there'll never be an attempt to renegotiate? No, because President Trump will get the same advice from State Department, from the Pentagon, and from the Treasury that President Obama got, which is you need to have influence and you need to have presence in Asia, and to do that, free trade locking you in there is the way to do it.
He's promised effectively a trade war with China. He's talked about naming them a currency manipulator on day one.
Yep.
We've talked, you and I, just this week about his 45% tariffs on Chinese goods. You must be worried as someone who knows the economy inside out about that.
Well, if he put a 45% tariff on all incoming goods into the United States from China, that will have a massive reduction in purchasing power and therefore income for the very people who turned out for the first time to vote for him, who are by definition probably lower income Americans. And so I don't
You don't think he'll do it?
No,
what I think... That's the best case scenario one's got, isn't it? Oh, he was lying when he said all that stuff.
No, I tell you what I think he'll do. I think he'll be more nuanced in what he does. So he will put some tariffs on and he will have some pretty heavy-duty discussions, but will it be across everything from China? No. Theoretically, if he did, of course, it would on a relative basis make New Zealand goods even more cheaper going to the United States. So, but it would slow the global economy.
Can we talk about security here? I mean, this is a guy who's refused to rule out using nuclear weapons. He's asked foreign policy experts during the campaign why we had all these nuclear weapons if we weren't prepared to use them.
Yeah.
Do you fear that the world will be a less secure place with Donald Trump in the White House?
Well, I think, no, I don't know their system well, but to get to the point at which you deploy a nuclear weapon in the United States, I at least want to believe, and I'm pretty sure I'll be right, that is a very, I'm sure, both convoluted and significant decision. I don't think it's a decision that the president just makes in isolation, because history tells you every president of the United States has done everything possible to avoid doing that. And so my own view is that he will probably continue to have some quite colourful rhetoric when it comes to saying, that the United States can defend itself if it needs to. But that's a long, long way from turning to the football and whacking in the codes.
Is the world a less secure place, though, this morning?
He might argue no, because he would say...
What would you argue?
Well, look, there's no question that, as I said earlier, if you look at New Zealand, we're not his problem child and we're not the top of his radar, are we? He is going to have some pretty robust discussions with a number of other countries. Now, what happens? I don't know, but you can see last night, the very first speech he gave, despite being on the campaign trail saying these people aren't adding value and these people aren't adding value and so forth and so on, his very first speech was to say, I'm president for all Americans.
You're not going to rescind that invitation to the Navy, eh?
Definitely not, no. They'll be here. The USS Sampson will be here for the 75th anniversary. Look, I think, my sense is, look at Wall Street. I mean, despite the Dow being down worse than 9/11 yesterday, the futures, this morning we wake up and it's up 200 points. It's like Brexit. On the one hand, I could paint a scenario for you why that's going to present some real challenges for the UK, but in the end, the markets have largely recovered. And I think that's what you're going to see in the United States. Eventually, people will have confidence in the overall system.